All right, welcome to the deep dive. Today we are diving into accents, those delightful variations in how English sounds across the globe.
Yeah, and it's more than just delightful, right? I mean, think about it. If you can understand a variety of English accents, that really shows a pretty high level of mastery, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's kind of like moving past the textbook and getting into the real-life symphony of English as it's spoken.
That's a great way to put it, a symphony.
Yeah.
And that's precisely what we're going to unpack today.
We've got 10 specific accents lined up, each with its own unique origin story and, of course, those little sound quirks that make it so distinctive.
Exactly. For each accent, we'll give you a little background, like where it comes from, what makes it special to the ear, and then we'll even play a sample sentence so you can hear it in action.
And, of course, we wouldn't leave you hanging. We'll also share some practical tips on how to train your ear to better understand each one.
Because, let's face it, sometimes even for native English speakers, certain accents can be tricky. But with a little practice, you can unlock the magic of understanding almost any English speaker out there.
Exactly. So, are you ready to embark on this auditory adventure?
Let's do it. Let's start with a classic, one that many consider the gold standard of British English. Received pronunciation, or as it's commonly known, RP.
Yeah, RP, that's the one you often associate with, say, BBC News readers or those classic British documentaries.
Right, it has a very polished, formal feel to it, and its roots actually go back to the way English was spoken in elite British schools.
So it's kind of like the accent of, well, the establishment?
Exactly, and for you, one of the key things to listen for in RP is that it's what we call non-rhotic. It means that the R sound at the end of words like car or better is very subtle, almost silent.
Ah, so it's like the R gets a bit shy at the end.
Yeah, it kind of fades away. Let's give you a sample sentence so you can hear what we mean. I suppose I'd ought to let you know that I'll be arriving precisely at 5.
Beautiful. So for someone who wants to get better at recognizing RP, what would you recommend?
Well, I always say immersion is key when it comes to accents. So for RP, listening to BBC News broadcasts or watching British documentaries can really help tune your ear to that particular sound.
That makes sense. All right, let's move on to an accent with a completely different vibe. Cockney, straight from the heart of East London.
Ah, Cockney. That's where things get really lively. It's a dialect that's full of energy, slang, and a real sense of community.
And it's definitely got some unique sound features, right? Like the H at the beginning of words sometimes goes on holiday.
Exactly. The H dropping is a classic Cockney trait. House becomes ouse, for example. And then there's the glottal stop, where the T sound in the middle of a word gets replaced with a sort of catch in the throat, like butter becomes buh.
It's kind of like the sound gets chopped off, right?
Yeah, it's a really distinctive feature. Here's a sentence that might give you a taste of Cockney. I ain't got no clue what you're talking about, mate.
I love it. It's got so much character. So for someone who wants to get to grips with Cockney, where should they start?
Well, for me, the best way to learn is through entertainment. Shows like EastEnders, or even some gritty British crime dramas, are full of Cockney dialogue.
Yeah, and seeing the characters interact can really help you understand the context and the slang.
Absolutely. Now let's journey north to Scotland, where the accents have a musicality that's just captivating.
Oh, the Scottish accent. It's so charming, but I admit it took me a while to get used to.
It can be tricky at first, but once you tune in, it's so rewarding. One thing that really stands out is the rolled R sound. It's like a little trill that adds a lot of character to the way words are pronounced.
And then there's the pace, right? It feels a bit faster than some other English accents.
Yeah, the rhythm can be quite quick, and the vowels tend to be shorter and sharper. To give you an example, listen to this. I've been working hard this week, so I have.
That rolled R is so clear. So for someone who's new to the Scottish accent, what's a good strategy?
Well, I'd say subtitles are your friend. Start by watching something Scottish with the subtitles on, so you can match the sounds to the written words. And then as you get more comfortable, try turning the subtitles off and see how much you could pick up.
Great advice. Now let's hop across the Irish Sea to Dublin, where the accent is known for its warmth and that delightful lilt.
Ah, the Dublin accent, it's like music to the ears. One thing that really makes it stand out is the way the TH sound is often pronounced as a T or a D. Think might sound like tink and that like that.
Yeah, it gives it such a unique flavor, and then there's that characteristic upward inflection at the end of sentences, even when it's not a question.
Exactly. It's like everything ends on a bit of a lift. Here's a sample sentence. Did you hear about the fella who moved in next door?
You can really hear how the becomes duh, and that rising tone at the end of next door. So how can someone get more familiar with the Dublin accent?
Podcasts are a great way to immerse yourself in natural conversation. Look for podcasts hosted by Dubliners. One suggestion would be the Blind Boy podcast, which is full of that authentic Dublin sound.
All right, now let's cross the Atlantic to the United States, where we'll start with the accent you often hear on TV and in movies, General American.
Yeah, it's often considered the default American accent, especially in broadcasting, though, of course, every accent has its own uniqueness. One of the key things that defines General American is that it's rhotic, meaning that the R sound is pronounced clearly in all positions.
So unlike RP, where the R might disappear at the end of a word, in General American, it's always there.
Precisely. Here's a sample sentence. I was wondering if you wanted to grab coffee later. You can clearly hear that R in wondering and later.
And luckily for anyone who wants to get accustomed to this accent, it's pretty easy to find, right?
Absolutely. Most mainstream American sitcoms and talk shows feature people speaking with General American accents, so just tuning into those can be a great way to get familiar with the sound.
All right, now let's head south in the U.S., where the pace slows down and the vowels stretch out. The Southern American accent.
Ah, yes, the Southern drawl. It's a classic. One of the things you'll notice right away is that the vowel sounds are elongated, giving it that laid-back, almost musical quality.
And it's not just the sound, right? There's also a whole collection of unique phrases and expressions you might hear down south.
Absolutely. You might hear someone say, well, now, I reckon. Or, y'all come back now, you're here.
It's full of warmth and charm. Here's a sentence to showcase that Southern sound. Well, now, I reckon we ought to get going before sunset.
You can really hear those vowels stretching out in now and going. So for someone who wants to experience the Southern accent, what would you suggest?
Movies set in the American South are a great option. Something like Forrest Gump or The Help will give you a fantastic sense of the accent, and the stories themselves are incredibly engaging.
All right, ready to hop over another ocean? Let's head to Australia, where the accent has a laid-back, almost playful quality. Yeah, the Australian accent is so distinctive, and it's got some really interesting vowel shifts. For example, day might sound more like die to you, and mate might sound more like might.
And then there's that upward inflection at the end of sentences, almost like everything's a question, even when it's not.
Exactly, it adds to that relaxed, friendly vibe. Here's a classic Australian greeting. G'day, mate. Fancy a cuppa?
Love it. You can really hear how mate almost sounds like might. So where should someone start if they want to get their ear attuned to the Australian accent?
For a fun and lighthearted approach, try watching some Australian TV shows. Bluey's a great one for all ages, and Kath and Kim is a classic comedy. And if you want something more informal, Australian travel vlogs on YouTube can be a great way to hear natural Aussie speech.
All right, let's continue our journey eastward to New Zealand, where the accent, often called Kiwi, has its own distinct charm.
The Kiwi accent is fascinating because while it shares some similarities with Australian English, it's definitely got its own personality. It tends to be a bit more nasal, and the vowels are slightly tighter.
One of the things that always stands out to me is how the I sound often morphs into something closer to a U sound. So fish and chips might sound more like fish and chips.
Exactly. That vowel shift is very characteristic. And the pace can be a bit quicker, with words feeling a bit more clipped compared to Australian English. Here's a sample sentence. We're going to the bidge for a bit of a swim, bro.
Yeah, that bridge turning into bidge is so Kiwi. So what's a good way for someone to get more familiar with the Kiwi accent?
For a real-life feel, I'd recommend checking out Kiwi YouTubers or even listening to interviews with New Zealand athletes.
Yeah.
You'll get a sense of the rhythm and those unique vowel sounds in a natural context.
All right, we're almost at the end of our global accent tour, but we can't miss South Africa. It's got such a vibrant mix of influences, especially in cities like Cape Town and Johannesburg.
Yeah, South African English is fascinating because it draws from both British English and Afrikaans, which has roots in Dutch. It creates a really unique blend with a musical tone and some vocabulary that you won't hear anywhere else.
Like the word braai for barbecue, right?
Exactly. Braai is a classic South African term. Here's a sentence that uses that word and also showcases that South African flavor. I think we should have a braai this weekend, hey?
That hey at the end is so distinctive. So for someone who's curious about the South African accent, where should they start?
South African news channels can be a great way to hear the accent in a more formal setting, but if you want something more entertaining, try watching some stand-up comedy by South African comedians. You'll get a sense of the humor and the way language is used in a really fun way.
All right, and last but not least, let's travel to India, specifically to urban areas like Mumbai, where Indian English has its own unique rhythm and clarity.
Indian English is fascinating because it often retains a syllable-timed rhythm, meaning that each syllable gets roughly the same amount of time. It's quite different from the stress-timed rhythm that's common in many other English accents. And you'll also hear some influence from native Indian languages in the way certain words are pronounced or emphasized.
It gives it a very distinct flow. And I've noticed that tag questions like adding no or isn't it at the end of sentences are quite common.
Exactly. Those tag questions add a little extra emphasis and can be a good way to check for understanding or agreement. Here's a sample sentence. You must be knowing that I've sent the email already. No.
That no at the end is so classic. So how can someone get better acquainted with Indian English?
For a really clear and engaging experience, I'd recommend checking out Indian tech YouTubers or watching TED's India Talks. You'll hear a lot of well-spoken urban Indian English in a variety of interesting contexts.
Amazing. We've just taken a whirlwind tour of 10 diverse English accents. If you found yourself struggling with some of them, don't worry, that's perfectly normal. Even native speakers can find unfamiliar accents challenging.
Exactly. And that's what makes this whole exploration so fun and rewarding. The more you expose yourself to different accents, the more your ear becomes attuned to the nuances of the language.
So let's shift gears a bit and talk about some practical ways to train your ear to better understand accents.
All right, let's get into the techniques. One of the most effective methods is called shadowing. Have you ever tried that?
I've heard of it, but I'm not sure I fully understand how it works.
It's actually quite simple. Basically, you listen to someone speaking, and then you try to repeat what they're saying in real time as closely as possible. It's like you're trying to become their echo.
So it's not just about understanding the words, but also mimicking their intonation and rhythm.
Exactly. It's about embodying their speech patterns. The best way to practice is to find short videos on YouTube, ideally with subtitles turned on, so you can see the words as you're hearing them.
That makes sense. So it's like a workout for your ears and your vocal cord.
Exactly. Another technique that can be surprisingly effective is what we can call the accent imitation game. Choose an accent for the week and try to speak with that accent as much as possible.
Hey, wait, so you're saying I should just walk around trying to sound Australian, even if I'm terrible at it?
Exactly. It doesn't matter if your imitation is perfect. The act of trying to reproduce the sounds and the rhythms really helps your brain tune in to the nuances of that accent.
That sounds like fun. So maybe on Monday, I'll try an Australian g'day, mate. And on Tuesday, I'll switch to a Cockney cheers, mate.
I love it. It's all about experimenting and playing with the sounds. Another helpful tip is to vary your listening styles. Sometimes the challenge with an accent isn't just the pronunciation of individual words, but the overall pace and the way stress falls within sentences.
So if I'm struggling with a particular accent, I could try listening to it at a slower speed.
Exactly. Many video platforms have playback speed controls, so you can slow things down initially to give your brain more time to process the sounds. And then as you get more comfortable, you can gradually increase the speed back to normal.
That's a great tip. And finally, what's an important mindset for someone who's trying to improve their ability to understand different accents?
I think the most important thing is to accept that confusion is a natural part of the process. Even native speakers encounter accents that they struggle with. It's perfectly acceptable to ask someone to repeat themselves if you didn't quite catch what they said.
Yeah, sometimes I feel a bit embarrassed to ask someone to repeat themselves, but you're right, it's completely normal.
Absolutely. And remember, understanding different accents is a journey, not a destination. It takes time, exposure, and practice. Just keep listening, keep practicing, and don't be afraid to make mistakes along the way.
That's really encouraging. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of English accents, what's the key takeaway for our listeners?
I'd say if you can comfortably understand even 7 or 8 out of the 10 accents we've covered today, that's a huge accomplishment. It means you're engaging with English on a really advanced level, beyond just textbook grammar and vocabulary. You're connecting with the real-life tapestry of how English is spoken around the world.
Absolutely. So keep exploring, keep listening, and don't let the fear of making mistakes hold you back.
And here's a thought to ponder as you continue your language journey. How might understanding these diverse ways of speaking enrich your life in unexpected ways? Could it open up new connections, new perspectives, new ways of experiencing the world?
That's a fantastic question. It's not just about language, it's about understanding people.
Exactly. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of English accents. Until next time, Keep learning, keep listening, and keep embracing the beautiful diversity of language.
And remember, the world is full of fascinating voices waiting to be heard. Have you ever noticed how English can sound so different depending on where you are in the world?
Absolutely. It's really quite fascinating.
It's like sometimes you almost need a translator, even though it is technically the same language.
Yeah, that's right. Today on the Deep Dive, we're going on a little audio adventure.
An audio adventure.
Yeah, to explore 10 distinct English accents from all corners of the globe.
10. Okay, that sounds like a lot to cover.
It is, but it's going to be fun. And for you, the listener, I think being able to understand different accents
It's a good sign.
is a really good sign of strong English comprehension skills.
Okay, so if you can understand a Cockney accent and a Southern American accent and an Australian accent, then you've really got a good grasp of English as a whole.
Exactly. So today we're going to let you hear these accents.
All right.
We're going to point out what makes them unique,
Yeah.
what are some of those key features, and we'll give you some tips on how you can start to understand them better.
I like it. Our mission is to make you a better listener.
Exactly. Ready to embark on our accent journey.
Absolutely. Let's start off with an accent that a lot of people think of when they think of like classic British English.
Okay.
Standard British English, which is also sometimes called received pronunciation or RP.
Yes, you'll often hear this accent on BBC News broadcasts. And historically, it's been considered the more formal accent, the prestige accent in the UK.
Okay, so let's hear it.
All right, so listen to this. I'm going to the station. I'll be there at 5 o'clock.
Very proper.
Very proper. Yes. And one of the things you'll notice straight away is the way the speaker pronounces the letter R at the end of words.
Oh, at the end of words.
In RP, the R sound is generally not pronounced. So a word like car ends up sounding more like ka.
Ka. Okay, yeah.
And this is a feature that actually has historical roots, and it really distinguishes RP from a lot of other accents, like most American English, for example.
Oh, interesting. So like a Boston accent?
Yeah, or like a general American accent, which we'll talk about later,
Okay.
where they do pronounce the R.
So that R is a big giveaway.
Yeah, it's a subtle thing, but it really does change the overall sound of how the language is spoken.
If someone wants to practice listening to this accent, what should they do?
A really good way is to check out BBC videos on YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
There's a wealth of content there, and you can really immerse yourself in that accent.
Oh, okay. So we've gone from the very proper ka.
Yes.
Now let's go to, I think, what a lot of people consider a very fun British accent.
Okay.
Cockney?
Ah, Cockney.
Yeah.
Yes. The very lively accent of East London.
Yeah, very, very much East London.
Yes. Very informal. Quite fast.
Yeah.
Here's an example.
Yeah.
I ain't seen him in ages, mate.
So much energy in that one.
Lots of energy, right?
Yeah.
And there's some really interesting things happening there, phonetically.
Phonetically.
Yeah, like the tut sound in the middle of words often gets dropped or replaced with a glottal stop.
A glottal stop.
Yeah, so like imagine instead of saying bottle, you say bowl, bowl. Oh,
Like a pause in your throat almost.
yeah, exactly. It's like a little catch in your throat. And another really well-known characteristic of Cockney is the way that the sound often becomes an F sound.
Oh, so like think becomes think.
Exactly. Think
Yeah.
becomes think, and this is called the fronting.
The fronting.
Yes. In linguistics, it's a really defining feature of the accent.
So if you want to practice your Cockney English,
Yes.
where should our listeners go?
Well, a show like EastEnders is brilliant for that.
EastEnders.
Yeah, it's so immersed in that London dialect, it'll really give you a good feel for how it's spoken day to day.
All right, so now let's head north from the busy streets of London to the rolling hills of Scotland
Okay.
and the beautiful Scottish accent.
Oh, the Scottish accent with so much character.
I love the Scottish accent.
It's beautiful, but it can be a little challenging to understand sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's always been easy to understand, but I know some people really struggle with it.
It does have its own particular sounds and a really strong rhythm and sometimes a very different vocabulary.
Okay, let's hear it.
Have a listen to this. I'm going to take the shop. How on you think?
Well, I love it.
It's great, isn't it? You can hear that faster pace, and as you mentioned, some different words popping up.
Yeah.
Yay, meaning small. Hey, meaning, yes, those are classic Scottish words.
Yeah, so how can we practice this?
I think with Scottish, because the sounds and the pace are quite different, starting with interviews online
Okay.
and using subtitles.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah, so you can really connect the sounds with the written words and then try listening again without them.
I like that.
You might also hear that rolling of their forests in some Scottish accents as well,
Okay, cool.
which can be another distinct feature.
All right, so from Scotland, let's hop over to Ireland
Yes.
and the Dublin accent specifically.
The Dublin accent, lovely.
It's a beautiful accent.
So warm,
Yeah.
so musical.
Very sing-songy.
Yeah, with that intonation that goes up and down.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Here's an example. Would you be going out tonight?
Yeah, so friendly.
So friendly, right. And one thing you might pick up on is that the sound becoming a T or little sound.
Oh, the becoming T or D.
Yeah. So, for example, think might sound closer to tink.
Tink, yeah.
And this might sound closer to dist.
Oh, yeah.
So that's something to listen out for.
So how can we practice this beautiful accent?
Well, I would say Irish podcasts,
Okay.
maybe some storytelling podcasts or some comedy shows
Oh, I like that.
where you can really hear that conversational style.
Now we have to go to America
Yes, of course.
because there are lots of American accents.
Many American accents, but we're going to start with one that's super common.
Okay.
General American.
General American.
Yes. So this is the one you often hear on American TV shows and national news broadcasts.
Right, so it's like the most neutral American accent.
Yeah, it's considered to be relatively neutral.
Okay, let's hear it.
Here's an example. Hey, are you coming to the party tonight?
Very clear.
Very clear, right? And one of the things you'll notice about General American is the pronunciation of that R sound.
Oh, the R is back.
The R is back. At the end of words and in the middle of words, so words like car, mother, hard, all have that very distinct R sound.
So different to RP.
Yes, very different to RP.
Okay, so how can we practice the very neutral general American accent?
Well, you are spoiled for choice with American TV series and movies.
Yeah, there's a lot of content out there.
Shows like Friends or Modern Family are great accessible examples.
Very good suggestions.
Okay, so staying in the U.S., but let's head south now to the southern states
Yeah, yes.
for the Southern American accent.
A very famous accent.
Very famous, often described as slower, friendlier, warmer. So let's have a listen. How y'all doing this evening?
You can hear how much slower it is.
Much slower, right? And those vowels are often drawn out.
Right.
Like night might sound more like nah.
Yeah.
Almost like the vowels have more time to breathe.
Yeah, so how can our listeners practice this accent?
YouTube is great for this.
Okay.
Lots of Southern speakers on YouTube, and you can hear a lot of variety within the Southern accent as well. But you can also check out classic movies like Forrest Gump
Forrest Gump, yeah.
to get a really good feel for it.
Great suggestion.
Okay, let's travel across the world now to Australia.
The Australia accent.
Oh, yes, the Aussie accent. So fun, so laid back.
It's a very popular accent.
It is, isn't it? People love it.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Here's a little example. Jade, you keen for a Barbie? This Arvo.
I love that one.
It's great, isn't it?
Yeah, Arvo. What is Arvo?
Arvo is afternoon.
Afternoon. Oh.
Yeah, so Australians often shorten words like afternoon becomes Arvo.
Okay.
Barbecue becomes Barbie.
Barbie. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's lots of these shortened forms in Australian English.
So how can we practice this one?
Well, there's a great children's show called Bluey.
Bluey.
Yeah, you might think, oh, it's a children's show, but it's surprisingly engaging even for adults.
Oh, cool.
Or you could try Australian travel vlogs,
Oh, okay.
and you can hear more of that natural conversational Australian English.
Because Australia, let's go to New Zealand.
Yeah, New Zealand.
So New Zealand and Australian accents, they do sound a bit similar,
Yeah, there's some similarities for sure.
but they're definitely distinct.
Definitely distinct, yeah.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to vowel sounds.
Vowel sounds. Oh, okay.
Yeah, you might hear similar slang or similar intonation patterns, but those vowels can be quite different.
Okay, let's hear it.
Listen to this. Let's grab some fish and chips, eh?
I mean, I can definitely tell that's different to Australian.
Yeah, for sure.
I couldn't tell you why.
One of the things people notice about New Zealand English is that I sound often sounds more like a U sound.
Oh, okay.
So fish can sound a bit like fush.
Fush, yeah.
Yeah. And there are some other subtle vowel shifts that happen too, which all contribute to that unique sound.
Okay. If we want to practice New Zealand English, what should we do?
Try listening to sports interviews from New Zealand
Okay,
or tourism videos where you've got locals speaking naturally.
great.
All right, let's go to India now,
India.
to Indian English.
Indian English.
Yes. Spoken by a huge number of people, and it has this really characteristic rhythm and intonation.
Okay.
It's generally quite clear, and sometimes there's a certain formality to it.
All right, let's hear an example.
You are knowing the answer no.
Okay, so the grammar is a bit different there.
Yeah, you might notice that the word order can sometimes follow patterns that are more common in Indian languages.
Yeah.
Also, that pronunciation of the V and W sounds can be quite similar.
Oh, V and W.
Yeah, and there can be a different emphasis placed on certain syllables.
Okay, so how can we practice Indian English?
TEDx India talks are fantastic for that.
TEDx India Talks.
Yeah, or you can explore Indian English creators on YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
You'll find a huge range of speakers there.
Awesome.
All right, last but not least, let's go to South Africa.
Okay, South Africa.
For South African English, a fascinating blend of sounds.
I mean, South African English must be one of the most diverse accents just because of all the different languages in South Africa.
Absolutely. It's a real melting pot of influences.
Yeah.
It takes elements of British English,
Yeah.
but it also has sounds and vocabulary from various local South African languages.
Okay, I'm excited to hear this one.
Here's an example. She's going to the shop now, hey.
Oh, okay, I hear the British English in there.
You do right. And did you hear that hey at the end?
Yes, the hey at the end.
That's a distinctive feature,
Oh, okay.
often used for emphasis or to seek agreement.
Okay.
And those vowel sounds can have a slightly different quality too.
How can we practice South African English?
South African podcasts are great,
Okay.
and comedy shows.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, they can give you a good feel for everyday South African English.
That was an incredible journey.
It was, wasn't it?
So many different accents, all English, but all so different.
Yeah, and it can feel a bit overwhelming at first, trying to get to grips with all these different ways of speaking.
So where do we even begin?
Well, let's talk about some practical listening tips that can really help you.
Okay.
And the key is to approach this in a structured way and be patient with yourself. One of the most helpful initial steps is to use subtitles.
Oh, subtitles.
Yeah. So when you're first exposed to a new accent, don't be afraid to turn on those subtitles.
Mm-hmm.
Watch a video or a show with the subtitles, and then try watching it again without them.
Okay.
Your brain will start to make those connections between the sounds you're hearing and the written words that you've seen.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah, it's a really effective way to train your ear.
So subtitles on first, then subtitles off.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Another really good tip is to repeat phrases out loud.
Oh, repeat them.
Yeah. So when you hear a phrase in an accent that you're trying to understand, pause the audio and try to say it yourself.
Oh, okay.
Focus not just on the words, but the rhythm,
Yeah.
the intonation. Try to mimic the speaker as closely as you can.
So, like, if I'm trying to practice my Scottish accent and I hear someone say, I'll be there in a wee bit,
Yeah,
I should pause it and say, I'll be there in a wee bit.
exactly. You got it.
Okay.
It's also important to remember you don't have to understand every single word.
Oh, really?
Nope. Just try to get the overall meaning.
Okay.
Train your brain to listen for the general feeling, the tone, the key words that carry the most important information. Context is your friend.
Oh, so it's like when I don't know a word when I'm reading a book,
Yeah.
I can usually figure it out based on all the other words.
Exactly. Same principle applies here.
Awesome. So what are some other tips?
But another really useful strategy is to pick one accent and really focus on it for like a week
Oh, okay.
and immerse yourself in that accent as much as you can.
Like, if I want to understand the Australian accent, I should just watch Australian TV shows and movies for a week.
Exactly. Listen to Australian podcasts, find news clips, interviews, all in that accent.
Yeah.
And maybe even try to pick up a few new words
Okay.
or slang terms that are common in that dialect.
That's a good idea.
And finally, remember to have fun with it.
Have fun with it.
Yeah, because learning about different accents is so interesting. It really enriches the language learning process. So don't get discouraged if you don't understand everything right away.
Yeah.
Just keep exposing yourself to these different ways of speaking. And the more you do that,
Yeah.
the better you'll become at understanding them.
So it's all about practice
It's all about practice.
and exposure.
And exposure, exactly.
Awesome. Well, I think we've covered so much.
We have.
And I'm really impressed that we managed to get through 10 different accents.
10 accents from around the world.
Yeah. And, you know, if you're listening and you can even understand a few of these accents,
Oh, yeah.
then that's a huge achievement.
Absolutely.
It really means that you've got great English comprehension.
Yeah. You should be proud of yourself.
So keep listening, keep exploring this amazing variety of English from around the world.
Yes. And enjoy the journey.
Enjoy the journey.
And who knows, maybe in a future deep dive,
Oh.
we could do some interactive exercises or dialogues
Oh, that's a good idea.
to help you practice even more.
I love that idea. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this accent adventure.
Thank you.
Happy listening, everyone.
Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, we all want to understand things better and faster, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, today we're going to give you a bit of a superpower.
Ooh, Ooh, a superpower. That sounds exciting.
It is. We're going to dive deep into the world of English accents.
Nice.
And we're going to unlock the secrets of 10 distinct accents, to be exact.
10.
Yeah. 10 different English accents.
Wow, that's quite a journey.
It is. And, we've been going through all sorts of fascinating resources to really break down these accents, to give you a clear picture of how they sound, how to recognize them, what are the key features.
Right, because when you can identify an accent, you suddenly unlock this whole other level of understanding of the language.
Absolutely.
It's like, those aha moments.
Exactly. It makes it so much more rewarding.
Yeah.
So today, our mission is to give you a solid foundation in these 10 accents.
Okay.
Help you tune your ears, really appreciate the amazing diversity of English.
I like that.
So, where are we going to start today?
Well, I think the natural starting point would be American English. I mean, it's the accent that many people are most familiar with, right?
Right.
It originates in the United States, of course. And, thanks to global media, it's become pretty prominent.
Yeah. Yeah. It really has.
One of the key features that we see highlighted in a lot of our sources is the clear pronunciation.
Right, that clarity.
And particularly that strong R sound.
Yes, that R really stands out. You can hear it at the end of words, even in the middle of words.
Absolutely. It's very distinct.
Yeah.
Like if you take the example sentence, hey, what's up? Do you want to hang out later?
Yeah.
That later, you really hear that R.
You do.
And it's quite different from some other English accents.
It is.
And an easy way to kind of get your ear accustomed to this is by watching popular shows like Friends.
Oh, yeah. Or even The Simpsons.
The Simpsons, exactly.
Yeah.
Very accessible.
Okay, so that's American English. What's next?
All right, well, let's hop across the Atlantic and we'll land in British English.
Okay.
Specifically, what's often referred to as standard British English.
Right.
So this is the accent you would typically associate with London, with broadcasters like the BBC.
Right. So what's interesting here is one of the defining features is the absence of that strong R sound at the end of words.
You got it. It's often called non-rhotic.
Non-rhotic, yeah.
So where an American speaker would say, later with a strong R,
Yeah.
somebody speaking standard British English might say something closer to late. Right? A very classic example sentence is, would you like a cup of tea?
Yes.
And you notice how that R in tea is not strongly pronounced?
It's almost like it fades away.
It kind of disappears.
Yeah. It's a real noticeable difference.
It is.
And the best way to get used to this, is listening to BBC News.
Yeah, or British YouTubers.
Lots of great content out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've covered standard British English. What about within the UK itself?
Well, within the UK, you've got so many fascinating regional variations. But one that we can explore is London English, often known as Cockney.
Cockney, yes.
And our sources tell us this originates in the East End of London.
Okay, now this one is where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
Because Cockney often has a much faster pace.
Right.
And there's this tendency to kind of soften or even drop T sounds.
Yeah, it gives it a whole different rhythm to the speech.
It does. It really does.
For example, the word water might become water.
Water. Yeah.
And an example sentence that really illustrates this is, I ain't got no idea, mate.
Yeah. Mate, of course, is a big giveaway as well.
It is. It's a very common term of address.
Yeah.
And the best way to understand this one, I think, is to watch some British dramas.
Yeah.
Maybe with subtitles initially.
Yeah, subtitles could be helpful.
Because it's that faster pace and those dropped T sounds, they take a bit of getting used to.
They do. They do. All right. So from the East End of London, where are we going next?
All right. Well, let's head north to Scotland.
Oh, Scotland.
And we'll delve into Scottish English.
Scottish English. I love Scottish English. It's got such a distinct sound. It's described as strong, almost musical.
It is, yeah.
And often spoken quickly as well.
It is.
Which adds to that kind of, I don't know, it's very unique.
Yeah, the musicality comes from the intonation patterns.
Yeah.
Some really unique vowel sounds that you'll encounter.
Yeah.
And a good example sentence to illustrate this is, I'm heading to the pub, you comin'.
Yeah, so you hear the dropped G and he and comin'.
Exactly.
And of course, ye instead of you is a classic Scottish thing.
Absolutely.
So how do you recommend people try to understand Scottish English better?
Well, given that there are these really distinct sounds and it can be spoken quite quickly, I think using subtitles is a good idea.
Yeah.
And also trying to repeat words slowly.
Okay.
Just to kind of get your mouth around those shapes.
Yeah. Yeah, takes a bit of practice.
It does. All right. Well, from Scotland, where are we going next?
All right, we'll cross the Irish Sea now.
Okay.
And we'll arrive in Dublin.
Oh, Dublin.
And delve into the world of Irish English.
Irish English.
Yeah.
Now, this one, particularly from Dublin, it's often described as having such a friendly and soft tone.
Yeah.
And this really interesting rising intonation at the end of sentences.
It does. Almost like every sentence has a little question mark at the end.
It does. It's almost like they're inviting you to agree with them.
It's very engaging, very welcoming.
It is.
And another characteristic is how C sounds are often pronounced as a D or a T.
Yeah.
So think might sound more like kink.
Right.
This might sound more like this.
Yeah.
And an example sentence that captures all of this is, are you going to the party? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You're really hearing that. Yeah. At the end.
Exactly.
The rising intonation. It's lovely. So how do people get more familiar with Irish English? Well, there's a wealth of content online. I mean, watching Irish vloggers on YouTube is a fantastic way.
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea.
To hear it in everyday conversation.
Okay, all right. So from Dublin, we're going, I believe, down under now, right?
That's right. Let's head down to the Southern Hemisphere
Okay.
and explore Australian English.
Aussie.
Aussie!
This is a great one.
Yeah.
So it's known for being very relaxed.
It is.
And there's a tendency to shorten words.
Right?
But also to kind of draw out some of the vowel sounds as well.
Absolutely.
It's a unique combination.
It is.
So an example of this would be, "Gay May, let's grab a coffee this Arvo."
Arvo, as our sources tell us, is short for afternoon.
Exactly. Arvo, that's a good one.
Yeah. Very common.
So to get familiar with Australian English, what do you recommend?
Well, there's a fantastic Australian cartoon called Bluey.
Oh, Bluey, yeah.
And it's aimed at children, so the language is clear.
Right.
But the accent, those little vocabulary quirks, it's all there.
Yeah.
Plus, it's a great show.
It's very enjoyable.
Okay, so from Australia, where are we going next?
Okay, well, we're going to stay in the Southern Hemisphere,
Okay.
but we'll move a little further east to New Zealand
New Zealand.
and explore New Zealand English.
New Zealand English. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Now, this accent is often compared to Australian English.
Right.
And while they do have some similarities, the key differences are often in the vowel sounds.
That's a great point. The classic example is fish and chips can sometimes sound like fish and chops.
Fish and chips, yeah.
It's subtle.
It's subtle, but it's definitely noticeable.
It's noticeable, yeah.
Yeah, it is. And a sentence that, kind of demonstrates New Zealand English is, we're going to the beach this weekend.
Yeah, very common phrase.
It is.
But again, pay attention to those vowels. They're really what set it apart.
So the key tip here is actively listen for those vowel sounds to tell it apart from Australian English.
Exactly.
Okay, so from the land of the Kiwis, where are we headed? All right, well, let's journey from the Pacific now over to the Indian subcontinent.
The Indian subcontinent. Okay.
And explore Indian English.
Indian English.
Yeah.
So this accent is often described as being very clear and polite.
It is.
But with its own distinct rhythm and intonation patterns.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's quite unique in that way.
It is.
Even though the vocabulary and the grammar might be, standard English.
Yeah.
The way it's spoken can sound quite different.
Yeah, the rhythm is really the key.
It is.
A good example sentence here is, I am sending you the message no.
No, at the end.
That no at the end.
Yeah, it's almost like a tag question.
It is.
It's a very common feature.
Yeah.
And really focusing on that unique rhythm is crucial for understanding Indian English.
Absolutely.
All right, so from India, we're going, I believe, to South Africa.
That's right.
To South Africa.
Yeah, let's head down to South Africa.
Okay, we're going to look at South African English.
South African English, yeah.
So this is described as a really interesting blend of influences.
It is.
Drawing from British English.
Yeah.
But also from various local languages.
Right.
And one of the fun things about South African English is, the tendency to end sentences with, hey.
It's almost a signature, that hey.
It is.
A perfect example of this is, let's meet at the mall. Hey.
Hey.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's often used in a very friendly way, seeking agreement or confirmation.
Yeah.
So the accent itself has a particular lilt to it, some unique vowel sounds, all thanks to this amazing mix of linguistic influences.
Yeah, it really is quite unique.
It is.
So what's your advice for understanding South African English better?
Well, pay attention to that hey
Yeah.
and practice repeating phrases
Yeah.
just to get that feel for the rhythm and the intonation.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so last but not least, we're going to Canada.
Canada.
Canadian English.
Yeah, Canadian English.
Now, this one is often said to be very similar to American English,
It is, yeah.
but there are some subtle differences.
There are.
Our sources point out that there's a bit of a softening of sounds in Canadian English.
Yeah.
And, of course, the frequent use of eh at the end of sentences.
The very friendly.
The very friendly eh, yeah.
Right.
So while to many ears, Canadian and American English might sound almost identical,
Yeah,
there are subtle differences, and that a can be a giveaway.
it can be, yeah.
So a good example of Canadian English is, sorry, I didn't mean to bump into you, eh?
Yeah, very polite.
That a really adds that Canadian charm, I think.
It does.
It does.
Yeah.
So, wow, okay, so we've been on this whirlwind tour.
Yeah.
10 different English accents.
A global journey.
It is. Just being aware of these differences is huge.
It is, yeah.
So what are some general strategies to get better at understanding these nuances?
All right, well, a really practical tip that comes up in a lot of our sources is using subtitles.
Subtitles, yeah.
So when you're watching videos or shows, turning on those English subtitles can really help.
It connects the sound with the written word.
Exactly. It helps your brain make that connection
Yeah.
between pronunciation and spelling.
So it's like giving your brain two ways to process that information.
Exactly.
Okay, what's another good technique?
Another fantastic technique is repetition.
Repetition, yeah.
So try pausing what you're listening to and repeating the sentence or phrase.
Okay.
You know, so if somebody says, "What's going on?" you repeat back, "What's going on?"
Right.
And this really engages both your auditory and your speech processing.
It's like you're mimicking.
You're mimicking, yeah.
You're helping your brain rewire itself to recognize those new sounds.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, another interesting suggestion was watching children's shows from different countries. Why is that?
Well, children's shows tend to use simpler vocabulary
Yeah.
and often have clearer pronunciation.
Right. Less slang, fewer idioms.
Exactly.
So, for example, if you want to get familiar with Australian English, you mentioned Bluey earlier,
Yeah.
but there's also, Peppa Pig from the UK,
Yeah.
Sesame Street from the US.
Yeah.
These shows are great because the language is simpler.
It is. It's less overwhelming
Yeah.
than, a complex drama
Right.
or a fast-paced news broadcast.
Yep.
It allows you to really focus on that accent.
Right.
And of course, they're entertaining.
They are. They are. So, it's important not to get discouraged if you don't understand everything right away.
Yeah, absolutely. It's totally normal to miss words
Yeah.
or not grasp every nuance.
Yeah. Even for experienced English speakers,
Absolutely.
it's totally fine to ask for clarification.
Yeah. Things like, "Can you repeat that, please?"
Right.
Or, "Sorry, I didn't quite catch that."
Yeah. Those are perfectly acceptable phrases to use.
They are.
And finally, I think this is a really important point.
Yeah.
Make it fun,
Yes. Enjoy the process.
Yeah.
Try playfully imitating different accents.
Right.
You don't have to be perfect.
Yeah.
But the act of trying can really help attune your ear to the subtle differences.
Yeah. It's about listening,
Yeah,
smiling at the funny sounds you make,
exactly.
and repeating.
It should be a positive experience.
This should be fun.
Yeah.
So we've explored 10 different accents.
We have.
You've made significant strides already.
Absolutely.
What's the key takeaway for our listeners?
Keep listening.
Yeah.
Maintain that curiosity.
Yeah.
Keep practicing.
Yeah.
The more you immerse yourself, the better your ear will become at recognizing those subtle differences.
Right. And speaking of fun,
Yeah.
we're thinking about maybe doing a Guess the Accent segment in the future.
Oh, that would be fun.
So stay tuned for that. But for now, remember that English is a global language.
Yeah.
It's constantly evolving.
Yeah.
It's spoken in so many amazing ways.
It is.
Keep exploring beyond this deep dive.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you'll discover so much more about its amazing tapestry.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us on the deep dive.
Thanks for listening.
We'll see you next time.